It's an honor and a special pleasure for me to welcome you on this very promising day in Ljubljana. And I hope you had a very good night's sleep and a big breakfast and now are ready to join us in this session, which brings us to the main topic of our conference. We are going to hear something about the uprising of Teachers Association in 4 different countries in the 19th century and going through the 20th century and in some lectures even till nowadays. We'll hear about their functions and influence and also about their suppression and political abuse, and we hopefully will also hear how they started again after the end of the suppression. The first lecture will be given by Baard Skogrand from the Bergen Museum, City Museum, which includes also the Bergen Schulmuseen. He'll talk about teachers' associations in Norway in the 19th century. But Baard, where are you? But before Baard is going to start, let me just give you some advice about the procedure. I've got very strict rules, and you have got 15 minutes, and I'll give you a warning, 2 minutes and 1 minute. Okay, and now welcome, and we are looking forward to your lecture.
Can you give me one now? Yeah, that's all right? No? Yeah. No? Is that better? No. How about now then? That's better? Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much, Ulla. It's very nice to be here. I'm going to make a small contribution here about, I think it's a little bit about teachers' associations and the development. And the first, you will see some, I have some something to show you here from the first phase of the Norwegian Teachers Associations. I think it will be... Okay, that's good, because now you can see the picture well. Good, because that's I was a bit worried about that. My contribution is going to be about teachers' associations, but I hope I can say a few words about museums, because I think that's an important aspect here. Why should you see this picture? Well, this I call it the generation of 1889. These are teachers, Norwegian teachers, gathered in Bergen in the year 1896 for some seminar in Bergen. And I just wanted you to see their looks. These are really, really confident people. They really know where they are, and they really have a mission, and they are full of self-confidence. And I just thought about it last night, and I thought, well, I think it will be hard to find a generation and a profession that are so much in line with their own times as the Norwegian teachers of the late 19th century and the early 20th century. They were kind of the carriers of the bildung, of the education, of what was this very optimistic new nation. They were liberal. They lived in a very liberal democracy. They were modeling the modern Norwegian citizens, and they knew it. very important Norwegian historian Rune Slagstad has called them the national strategies of Norway from this time. These are the people. Just look at their outlooks, their venues. If they went out of wherever they were in Bergen, they would see all these new big houses that have just been built. This is the Kroningen from 1880, kind of a castle in this small city of small wooden houses. A few years later, they could present themselves and their school in this kind of castle-like building at Dragefjellet. Then came the Rottaugen, which is perhaps the most dominant, still very dominant in the Bergen city picture. The Nordnes school and the Møhlenpris school. These were all built over a few years. And I'm just showing these to you just to give you an impression of the physical surroundings that these very self-confident people had to, or could present themselves in, because that's very, very important. Actually, the School Museum of Bergen is trying to open a historical classroom in this building, I think on this corner here. I hope that will be next year or something. This is something quite different. I tried to find a picture of the original Norwegian teacher, the one who worked for, or the one that was, those who worked for 1.5 century in the school that was established with the Danish-Norwegian school laws of 1739. The problem is that photography came a little bit too late. So, but I found this one. It's Torkil Taknes. He was born in 1808, and he was working much of his life in this ambulatory school. The schools that never had a house, that with teachers wandering around from farm to farm. I think living a quite hard life, and I'll show you some examples of that. His Taknes' typical working space would be this here. He would have this suitcase where he brought his equipment, and then he would have some table at some farm where he could gather the children of that area. I think until about 1850, this would be the situation for 80 or 90% of the Norwegian school teachers. And I think the most important point about this school, the 1739 school, is that it's a general school. That's a very special thing. I think we got the general school at an early stage, but it's a school for faith. It's for bringing up loyal subjects of the church. That's the only point about it. And it's not a school that is in any way or has any mission outside what is, or outside the farm where it takes place. It's a kind of appendix to what's going on. Because the religious and the moral upbringing of the children is still, it's the responsibility of the families themselves. This is just some helping function for that. Well, in the years from the mid-19th century, we had all these, like all over Europe, and not at least in Norway, we had all these processes that really changed society. People moved to the cities, they started working in factories, they somehow life changed, and we experienced it, and people started saying, we need another kind of school. Faith is not enough, we need a school for citizenship. And our man here, Torkil Taknes, he might, at the end of his career, I think he might have worked in one of these schools here. between 1860 and, because now we're in the countryside, we were in the city, with those big schools in the countryside. Between 1860 and 1905 or something, 5,500 of these single-room schools were built all around Norway. So this ambulatory school was more or less gone by the turn of the century. I think Turkey might have worked in one of these. This is at Voss, not so very far from Bergen, where you were at the Symposium in 2007. Well, Torkil, the teacher, might also have joined one, I don't know this, but he might have joined one of the early teachers' associations. Because the first very fragmented startings of teachers' associations in Norway was already in the 1820s, but that was in the cities. Some teachers met, just started talking to each other. You know, we are very isolated people. Perhaps we should exchange some experiences, help each other a little bit. Most of these associations only lasted for a year or two, and then perhaps 5 years later there was another try. They were fragmented, fragile, often very short-lived. They were founded by teachers, but often also by the local priests, who I think somehow felt a little bit sorry for their teachers. They had very modest ambitions, but I think they're also very, when we come up to the period around 1850, I think they are also very interesting as as documentations of an extreme change and a profession that is very, very much under pressure. Because we must remember that these teachers that were wandering around after 1739, they were mostly non-educated people. They had got some very simple instructions from their priests, but they were not men of education, to be modest. With these new thoughts about a school that should develop citizens, not just real religious citizens, there came a lot of change, and this really and you can see that at the mid-century, the teachers are not necessarily in front of the development. So I'll just show you some. If you go into this, what there is of documentation of these early teachers' associations, you can see they are not about reform. They are not about the bright future or the modern age. They are about very, very. They give us a glimpse of of hardships mostly. Here we have some a quote from Valdres, that's in eastern Norway. The physical and spiritual damage to the teachers is of unbelievable proportions. This is there is more needed than simple human nature to endure this shifting way of life. So they are it's very much complaining here, and I think they really think the kind of life they live is very, very hard. And then this modern school coming with geography and literature and economics and strange things that these teachers have never taught before. The expectations are rising year by year, the teacher from Ljubljana reports. We are nowhere near what is expected of us. So there's a kind of a depressed feeling in the profession. I feel far from capable of fulfilling the task I have been given. This is Christiana, that's what used to be Oslo. And there is one who is actually refusing to teach geography because it's just too difficult. And then, walking around among these peasants who were self-owning and built on their own fortunes and had nothing but contempt for these people on low salaries walking around, living in their houses, taking care of their children. These are some quotes here again from Eastern Norway. In general, the people of the house do not care about the school. The teacher is looked upon as a tramp, or we have to do with generally unable subjects, and only rarely men with a calling. That's the impression that's the impression that people have of the teachers at this point. His bed is made among the servants. That's in Oslo. Among the wealthier peasants, teachers are seen as a burden and very unimportant person. A teacher from Øyer, that's close to Lillehammer, reports. Well, no work requires more appreciation than that of the teacher one summons up, but they are not getting that appreciation. Well, what's the story of this? First of all, there is this contrast. I think when you look upon the teacher profession of Norway from 1850 to 1890, there is a tremendous shift. That's almost unbelievable. They're just the way the world looks different, actually. When I meet people in our museums, I very often, or especially at the school museum, I very often end up talking about the 19th century because there's so much happening. And the 19th century is, to me, such a fantastic demonstration of history itself, that history is change, and people change. I think that's perhaps a message I would like to bring, that I think in museums in general, and not at least in school museums, we tend to end up telling stories. Often we tell stories about people as if people are people. It's just the surroundings have changed, but people change enormously. The outlook of people, the way the world looks, changes a lot. I think that's okay. That's to me, that's history. And looking into the Teachers Association, I just found these sources here that I think really demonstrates that quite heavily. Okay, but then I'll just finish there then. Okay.